Hey everybody. For most of us looking to come from pretty normal beginnings and build sustainable wealth, the actual way to do it is kind of fairly straightforward in theory, right? Which is that you would get a job, earn your income, you invest, and those investments need to pretty much exist in a big enough way so you need to have enough money invested for a long enough period of time in the right vehicle, or big enough way in the right vehicle for a long enough period of time. Those are pretty much the three things that we need to focus on. So I think no matter where you are on your journey, the three questions you're going to have to ask yourself is, do I have enough invested? Have I got it invested in the right vehicle? And have I allowed enough time? And it's surprising how I think if you answer no to any of those questions, you get a great way of immediately focusing on where improvements may be needed in your plan. And then just to put some attention on it can have a massive, massive positive impact on your welfare and success over a relatively long period of time. Now, we need to kind of break that down a little bit more. What we typically find is that there's a lot of focus potentially on getting rich quick. And if you just put a rough timeline against it, say in the next 3 to 5 years, that's relatively short term for most serious investors, but probably longer term for those who don't have the sophistication. Well, 3 to 5 years is nothing. When we're looking at kind of wealth building curves and how the majority of the world's successful investors have done it, you're typically talking about wealth being realized over maybe more like a 20 to 30 year period. And even then, that's 20 to 30 years on the back of some massive accelerants, right? Which include economic events which have allowed them to accumulate assets quite cheaply and then see massive appreciation. So really and truly, it's what Warren Buffett talks about, which is getting rich slowly. And that getting rich slowly, again, is about the consistency, having the right amount invested in the right vehicle for a long enough period of time. There are things that can definitely help the success of how we do all three of those things. So when it comes to things like, say, having the right amount, right is relative. I think everyone's got to kind of figure it out based on their ambitions, standards. So you kind of come up with your number. But certainly what helps is to earn more. It should be no secret, and we should look at income as a massive lever that we will be happy to pull in realising our plans. We've got to get income consistently growing as much as possible. And if you've currently got, say, one job, get another. If you've not got a side hustle, look into one. Whatever it is to grow the income number, that is what helps you with the invest enough part. Because for all of us, there's only so much money that you can really cut. And whilst being efficient and cutting what you can, so not to be silly, is important. The easiest thing to kind of vary is undoubtedly the income number. So that's how you get enough. The next part of the equation is to make sure you are in the right vehicle. So over time, the real estate, property, buy-to-let, that has been the biggest wealth builder. That has been the biggest wealth builder in society. Land is finite. You can't just go and randomly create more. And so investments in property have typically produced the greatest returns. And the dynamics of it is quite simple. You put some money in, your money's locked up, you've got the investment, and you're basically able to achieve returns in two different ways. One of which is through capital growth and the other is through cash flow. And when you put those two things together, you put on the impact of inflation, which increases asset prices and asset values, and the ability to essentially recycle money through investment property, and you tack on leverage. So when you go and invest £1, you're typically being able to borrow 4. When you add those things together, that accounts for the vast majority of property related wealth that we've seen. And of course, you look at everything over time. and in the context of different economic events. So if it's the case that we've seen, property would have been a relatively small multiplier of average incomes 15, 20 years ago, and all of a sudden property has become kind of relatively unattainable for many. It's those economic situations that basically have accounted for an awful lot of individual wealth created in the last 20 years, probably in a fairly shorter period than that, quite frankly. So it's understanding a little bit about how those things work together, and then that helps you understand about vehicles. Now, alongside real estate, you've got things like the stock market. So you'll hear, for many different reasons, stock market investors speaking, people who really still believe in the value of markets. I'm not really here to question that or challenge that. Anyone who has been on the channel for a while knows that I'm not as big a believer in the great returns promised by the stock market, and I think there are other vehicles that are at least worth considering as alternatives. However, you've got the stock market as a great predictor, and a great enabler of wealth over a long enough period of time. If there are other vehicles that you're interested in, then by all means it's for everybody to do their own research. But typically, if you look at the majority of people who have accumulated significant wealth over a reasonable period of time, the vast majority can be attributed to property and stock markets. So you choose your vehicles and use those as almost as the baselines, and it's then for everybody else is to do our own research and to figure out how much we want to vary from the norm. The next factor then, just before going to the next factor, one thing that's definitely worth saying when it comes to then choosing that vehicle is just to remember how much influence we actually have over which vehicles we choose, and how much we are able to decide to change and increase our level of financial awareness in order to figure out the right vehicles. You know, if you think about just how much YouTube has opened up the realm of investing knowledge, has opened up our ability to just break down knowledge barriers, it's quite staggering. So there's a massive benefit to using things like YouTube in the right way, so that we understand which vehicles to go in. And the next thing is time. You know, that's the last factor, is doing everything for a long enough period of time. You know, if you think on average, we become economically active around, say, 18. We say would pass away. Average life expectancy in the developed world is probably more like 88. You've got 70 years to play. So if you think, even if you waste 14 years, if you consider it a waste, you know, it's just like knowledge accumulation for 20% of the time. You still got 80% of your time to go. And so, the actual window to invest and to actually see those returns come through is massive potentially. And I think that's just a bit of a mindset shift, and getting away from some of the whole get rich quick stuff that we see around a lot more often, and more around slightly more longer term vision of wealth creation and wealth accumulation. You put all that stuff together, and over a reasonable amount of time in some reasonable vehicles with a decent amount of money in there, you'll make your bank. Some of us will make it faster than others, for different reasons. But I mean, we should remember that the dynamics are there, and increasing our knowledge, increasing our income to the best extent we can, and then having patience is kind of like the cheat code for all this stuff. So good luck with it, wherever you are on your journey. Speak to you soon. Bye.